Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Mando Bro is back, everybody, and man was it awesome watching him take apart a Klatooinian gang wielding the Darksaber. I mean, sure, he hasn't figured out the weight of the blade just yet, but watching a Mando cut people in half is something I guess I've always wanted. There's something beautiful about the imperfection and raw carnage we see when Din Djarin wields the blade, something that we would have never gotten from a Jedi, who just makes everything look so easy. Just like how plus-size women want to see themselves being represented in advertising, I also want to see lightsaber-wielding fighters that I can relate to on the screen. The fact that he burns his own leg with the lightsaber is so relatable. I'm sure half of you out there, if you actually were given a real lightsaber, would also lose some limbs and chunks of flesh. Yet this is the first time I remember seeing someone in the Star Wars galaxy actually hurting themselves on their own saber. Terrific. So Din Djarin is kind of in between seasons and in between missions. Baby Gogurt is now safe in the hands of Master Luke, and Mando Bro is kind of just regrouping and reconnecting with old friends. He catches up with the armorer and also has another knife fight with Paz Vizsla. Silly jetpack Gatling gun Mandalorian, Darksabers are for normal-sized leading characters, not for heavies. Din Djarin then catches up with the Tatooine mechanic Peli Motto, who I realize now is essentially the Joe Pesci of the Star Wars galaxy. It's great. What's even better is that she has a replacement for Din Djarin's beloved and much maligned Razor Crest, the gunship that got Din Djarin through a pretty tough first 2 seasons. It gets shot at a few times, crashes more than once, including into a salty ocean, which is definitely good for the electronics. It even survived being taken apart by a bunch of filthy Jawas. But ultimately, a suborbital turbo laser bolt is what ended the Razor Crest for good. At first, when I saw Din Djarin's future ship hidden beneath those sheets, I thought to myself, well, this is probably going to be a little too small for a bounty hunter. It's most likely a starfighter. A closer inspection made me think that maybe this was a Bella Bob 22 starfighter, specifically the one named Solus One, that General Grievous flew during the Clone Wars, and later on was used by Obi-Wan Kenobi to escape Order 66. But then I saw this ship had thinner and more elegant lines, a less bulky cockpit, and of course, the classic yellow trim. It's then that it dawned onto me that Din Djarin's next ship is going to be a N-1 Starfighter. The N-1 Starfighter is a very special starship, especially for those of you prequel fans out there. It was designed specifically for Naboo's Royal Security Forces. This product was very uniquely Naboo in characteristics, despite not being designed by the Naboo. For one, most small mid-rim planets like Naboo, which lacked heavy manufacturing, a starship industry, and martial history, will source their planetary defense forces, equipment, ships, and even sometimes personnel from a third party, usually from some large manufacturer and ship designer or even a mercenary company. But Naboo at the time was firmly committed to creating its own starfighter because it valued its own sovereignty and wanted to be independent from outside sources. Having someone else build your main starfighter is a defense issue and security threat. Unfortunately, Naboo lacked the skill and expertise to design their own starfighter, and so they would contract this out to Nubia Starfighter Incorporated, a small boutique starfighter company that designed many of the Royal Naboo's vessels. Their work and craftsmanship were top of the line, and their ships fetched a lot of money. But in the specific case of the N-1 Starfighter, for security reasons, the Nubians would only design the ship. The Theed Palace Space Vessel Engineering Corps would be the ones who would manufacture and assemble the starfighters themselves. It's almost as if Naboo bought like a pre-designed kit car and then just built it in their garage at home or space hangar. The N-1 Starfighter's design was very typically Naboo. This was a planet of independent thinkers. The ancient families that ruled this planet can trace their lineage all the way back to Alderaan, the heart of the galaxy. And so the N-1 Starfighter had to be beautiful and sleek and also extremely functional and up-to-date compared to other patrol starfighters in its class. We'll talk about specific stats a little later on in this video. For now, I want to focus on one very specific feature of the Naboo Starfighter, which kind of explains why it's designed the way it is. What I want to point out for you is the front of the N-1 Starfighter. It's covered in chromium, the same type of extremely reflective material used on Royal Naboo ships like Padme and Palpatine's own private luxury yachts. It's rumored, by the way, that Captain Phasma's armor, which is made out of the same material, was sourced directly from Palpatine's old ship. Chromium was a relatively expensive material to use on the outside of a ship, but it had very good heat deflection properties, and so it would actually increase the armor's effectiveness on this starfighter. At the same time, it served a dual purpose. When an N-1 Starfighter does flybys for major events and parades for the monarchy, the chromium glints quite a lot and looks majestic in the sun. The Naboo really love appreciating the little finer details in life. This is so Naboo. Form and function. The N-1 Starfighter actually has both, which is very rare. Starting off with the J-Type 221 sublight engines, these sleek and powerful thrusters are pretty oversized when compared to the rest of the ship and can propel it at extremely high speeds. Also, because Naboo is very focused on environmental protection, the J-Type 221 thrusters burn fuel at an extremely hot temperature, reducing the amount of emissions that escape from the Starfighter. It can produce the N-1 Starfighter at an atmospheric top speed of 1,100 kilometers per hour, which is quite impressive. It also had a max acceleration of up to 3,750 Gs in space. By the way, a while back, a YouTuber placed all of the major starfighters in Star Wars in a wind tunnel, and it turned out that the starfighter with the best aerodynamic profile was the N-1 Starfighter. Actually, it was the only one that could legitimately fly in the real world with our current technology. The starship was also equipped with a Nubian Monarch C4 hyperdrive, which was rated as a Class 1.0 hyperdrive. This was highly unusual for a patrol starfighter that was limited to basically defending its local system. Also, at the time, a Class 1.0 hyperdrive was unheard of, even for military vessels. Only later on during the Galactic Civil War did Class 1 hyperdrives become more popular. And then again, these were usually after-market hyperdrives that were extremely finicky and prone to failure, like the one found on the Millennium Falcon. I guess the N-1 Starfighter occasionally did accompany the Monarch or Naboo Senator to Coruscant or other planets for diplomatic missions. I guess the Naboo were smart enough to understand that if they were going to design a small defense fleet, they might as well make it as high quality as possible. Despite being even smaller in displacement than an A-Wing, the Naboo Starfighter packed a punch for such a small, dense patrol craft. It had dual laser cannons, but it could also carry up to 10 plasma torpedoes, which were split between 2 launchers. The ship also had a shield generator on it, which was pretty rare for a ship of its class during that time. Although it should be mentioned that the N-1 Starfighter was much more of an evasive fighter than a tank. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of the most maneuverable starfighters in the galaxy. The N-1 Starfighter also had an astromech droid port built for navigational support and repairs, but that's been removed because Din Djarin's family was murdered by a bunch of droids and he's not ready to let go of that past trauma just yet. But the most impressive part of this sleek Naboo Starfighter is the fact that it's really well put together. There couldn't have been more than just a few dozen of these starfighters built, and several of them were destroyed during the blockade of Naboo. Yet since 33 BBY, when the ship was introduced, N-1 Starfighters keep reappearing and showing up, sometimes in stock form or in heavily modified designs like Din Djarin's. 68 years after it was first introduced, the Resistance still fields a N-1 Starfighter during the Pinnacle Battle of Exegol. I mean, sure, there are still X-Wings flying around during that time, but the X-Wing was actually a lot newer than the N-1, and there were tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of X-Wings being manufactured throughout the course of history, not just a few dozen. My conclusion is that the N-1 Starfighter is superbly built, which is not surprising given the fact that each one of these ships' parts were handcrafted and hand-assembled. And so this wasn't just some beautiful starfighter from the Italian river country, it was actually the Rolls-Royce of starfighters. You can have the best version of a tool, but it still might be the wrong tool for the job. The N-1 Starfighter's biggest disadvantage is that it's considered a short-range patrol craft, the least capable and least flexible class of starfighters available. It makes sense for the Royal Naboo Security Forces to design such a craft because that is kind of what you need for systems defense. These were light starfighters designed to operate very close to the home base, whether it be groundside spaceport or some defensive orbital platform. Now, patrol fighters like this are mainly designed to be defensive interceptors. They can pull over freighters and other civilian craft disobeying the rules in the space lanes, but they lack the heavy weapons to actually engage a capital ship, as we saw during the blockade of Naboo. Anakin literally had to fly inside of the Trade Federation control ship to destroy it. Short-range fighters are usually smaller in size and have less complex and less expensive components on board. Patrol craft are usually designed for very simple jobs. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a superbly designed ship. This is an uncommonly well-outfitted patrol craft which allows it to perform much closer to a standard multi-role fighter like an X-Wing. But the N-1 Starfighter's power system and chassis hides a much more civilian origin. The sleek and minimalistic design makes the N-1 essentially like a Lambo police car. which means it's far too fancy and over-engineered and expensive to be deployed en masse. But it does make a really good one-off custom ship, which is kind of the case here. So would you actually want to take one of these ships into battle? Well, I guess if you're highly skilled pilots who maybe had the Force on your side, it'd be a good idea, because this ship reminds me quite a lot of the vessels used by the Jedi during the Clone Wars. Lightly armored and lightly shielded, but ridiculously fast and maneuverable. Unfortunately, the Mandalorian is the complete opposite of a Jedi pilot. He takes a ton of damage and survives because of his armor, and not because of his evasive abilities. How he'll adjust to this elegant starfighter will be interesting. Well, there you have it, guys. That is our coverage of the N-1 Starfighter. I am really stoked to see this beautiful ship back on screen. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about this. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.